Sharp auras spread out, and sound waves reverberated in all directions around the plaza. It was as if there was a kind of magic causing the spectators to tremble. As the voices of the dozen or so young men fell, the space in the plaza froze. The 18 young men of Heaven's Guard were fierce and intimidating, and they didn't back down a single inch when faced with the 100 Blossom sect. The young women in the crowd whispered to each other, "Those men are all so handsome. They're so cool. I wonder what their names are." There were even those among the top female disciples of the 100 Blossom sect who stole admiring glances. Not many in the entire river continent could be said to compare to the young men of Heaven's Guard. Hope looked at the 18 people, and her brows furrowed briefly into a frown. Then her mouth formed a wide smile, and her eyes were bright as she looked at Morgan again and said, "Let's do it. If you defeat me, the debt between the 100 Blossom sect and Raymond will be written off. If you lose, you and Raymond will have to destroy your own ability to practice martial arts." "Okay, let's do it. You're a woman, so I'll let you make the first move," said Morgan with a nod. Upon hearing Morgan's words, Hope first looked at him in shock, and then she laughed. But after a moment, she stopped smiling. "Let's fight in another space. The people of Crescent City can't bear to watch. It'll be torture for them," she said. "All right," Morgan agreed. Hope said nothing further. The runes on her body were like a rain of light surrounding her like a fine mist. Suddenly, Hope's charming and enchanting aura became holy and pure, and her temperament was calm and unhurried. "Fight!" Her voice was deep and sonorous, and as soon as she had uttered the word, a storm started brewing in the sky above her head. Dark clouds gathered, blocking the sun, and delicate petals covered Hope's body. When she soared into the sky, the dark clouds followed in her wake. Morgan casually looked up, and then his feet flashed as he rose from the ground and followed Hope into the depths of the sky, quietly disappearing into the dark rolling clouds. The crowd observed the scene unfold from the plaza below, and many with expert knowledge were shaken by what they had seen. "Opening up a space battlefield requires real skill. I never would have believed that Hope would have the ability to do such a thing." "It's my understanding that an expert must be at least at the martial domination stage to pull this off." "Could it be that Hope has actually broken through to that stage?" Opening a space battlefield required the powerful skills of an expert at the martial domination stage, and the onlookers couldn't accept that Hope had reached that level. "Maybe that's not what's happening. Maybe she's not using her training level at all. Maybe she has a treasure that can expand the space." "But why has she chosen to open a space battlefield?" "Maybe she's afraid Crescent City will be destroyed, and this is the best way of protecting it." Most people didn't want to believe that Hope was some kind of freak at the martial domination stage, but rather that she was in possession of hidden treasures that enhanced her skill. The audience looked on as Hope and Morgan disappeared from view. They had hoped they were in for a good performance, but now that Hope and Morgan had left for the space battlefield, they wouldn't get a look in. All that was left for them to do was chat among themselves. "Hope mentioned the World Warriors in Cahir just now. Morgan can't be related to Cahir, can he?" "Cahir? That's a familiar name. Where have I heard that name before?" "Have you forgotten already? Cahir is the leader of the 12 heroes. He was responsible for defeating Prince Leroy of the Dragon Race." It had been rumored that Cahir was the leader of the World Warriors. Morgan and the others of Heaven's Guard were part of the World Warriors, so it was likely they were linked to Cahir. "I remember now. So he's the savage brute responsible for killing Prince Leroy." "Anyway, who do you think will win today?" Morgan looked around, and his eyes fluctuated imperceptibly. "This space is impressive," he thought. "She must possess some extraordinary treasures to be able to create this." The gray space was filled with space ripples, and it felt as though it might collapse at any moment. Hope glanced at Morgan and smiled. "This is one of the treasures of the 100 Blossom sect. But your training won't be suppressed," she reassured him. "And I won't have any advantage, so you can fight with peace of mind." "Okay, let's do this," said Morgan decisively. "As I said, you can make the first move." He looked across at Hope and knew he couldn't afford to be careless. Hope continued to look at Morgan and smile. The runes on her body shone like a divine light, and flower petals swirled around her, forming a kind of whirlwind. A floral fragrance filled the air, and her runes blazed brighter. Suddenly, she flew across the sky. Her delicate hand was covered in energy, and she moved as fast as lightning as she pounced toward Morgan. Just as she made her move, Morgan's expression changed. At that moment, he knew he had met a formidable opponent. On the surface, Hope appeared charming and seductive, but the reality was she was a terrifying force to be reckoned with. After all, she was one of the 12 heroes, and almost as famous as Cahir. Morgan wasted no more time. A fierce aura surged from his eyes, the temperature abruptly dropped, and he made his move. Wave after wave of a cold and forbidding aura spread from his body, and a hand swept out. Using his golden aura and runes, he blocked Hope's palm imprint. Hope was surprised by the move, and this was etched on her face briefly before she unleashed an even more powerful aura. Her hands continuously formed seals, and her attacks struck like thunderbolts, causing the runes in the space to dazzle and flash toward Morgan. Morgan's eyes were sharp, and his aura cold. His black robe fluttered in the breeze as he continued to resist Hope head-on. Over the years, he had been at an advanced level in killing and fighting. In the Vicious Land, he had obtained an ancient inheritance. Inside the Violet Lightning Cauldron, he had been strengthened by the body rhyming formula. He was Morgan, the head of Heaven's Guard. Although he kept a low profile and was unpretentious, he had already become famous throughout the Central region. He was considered by some to be the World Warrior's secret weapon. Many people in the Central region were even more afraid of him than of Jared. Suddenly, as the runes dazzled and the space trembled, a great battle erupted between the man and the woman. The man was fierce and murderous, the woman charming and beautiful. "I didn't expect you to be at the marvel level of the martial sovereign stage," said Hope, her voice crisp. "Whereas you seem to be one step away from the element level of the martial sovereign stage," responded Morgan calmly. As they exchanged small talk, the battle between them continued amid dazzling lights and quaking space. The throngs of observers looked up from their place in the plaza below, but in the sky above Crescent City, which was covered in dark clouds, all they could hear were rumbling echoes reverberating in the air. Listening to the muffled, thunderous sounds, it wasn't difficult to imagine the intensity of the battle between them. There was nothing they could do except wait patiently for the final result. Time passed slowly, and after more than an hour, the space above the plaza was still filled with muffled rumbles, cracks, and thuds, while the 100 Blossom Sect disciples grew more anxious with each passing minute. Finally, the muffled, thunderous energy in the space above the square gradually calmed down, and the audience grew excited again and focused once more on the sky above.
"Do you think the victor has finally been decided?"
"I wonder who will win." Zaid, the Silver Fox, Randall, Diego, Anthony, Raymond, and the others all raised their heads to look upward, and none could conceal their anxiety. As the spectators looked on, the dark clouds parted, allowing sunlight to pour down on Crescent City, and Morgan and Hope appeared in the sky. Morgan's golden aura surged as if it could destroy everything, and Hope appeared calm and serene, her whole body surrounded by light. "For the sake of Cahir, I'll let you leave," Hope said. "But remember, this battle isn't over yet." As she spoke, the runes on her body flickered as if smoke and mist shrouded her. "Wait for me to finish my other business," responded Morgan. "So long as I survive, I'll be back." "All right," she said solemnly. As she regarded him from under her eyelashes, her eyes briefly revealed a different look, but it was gone in a moment. Morgan addressed Zaid and the others in the plaza below. "Come on, let's go," he said. No sooner had his voice faded than Zaid and the others stomped their feet on the ground and immediately flew into the air and left with Morgan. Raymond was the last to leave. "Tell Larissa that I'll be back," he said as he looked at Hope. "Then no one will be able to stop us from being together." As he spoke, he clenched his fists, and then he turned and flew into the air, disappearing into the sky above Crescent City. Hope's eyes flickered as she watched the 18 men leave. A beautiful middle-aged woman appeared quietly by her side, her invisible aura emitting a sense of danger. "Hope, this matter concerns the reputation of the 100 Blossom Sect, and just letting them leave like that doesn't look good," she said. "I didn't win," Hope said bitterly. "Are you saying that you lost?" asked the woman in surprise, her eyes filled with disbelief. She found that very difficult to accept. Hope turned to the woman and said, "But neither did I lose. Morgan is special. He's different from Cahir. If we want to determine the victor, I'm afraid it'll be a fight to the death. Otherwise, it would be unfair to him, as he only has killing moves. He can't use his other skills." "So can we just let this matter go?" asked the beautiful woman, frowning slightly. If Morgan, Raymond, and the others left, it wouldn't serve the reputation of the 100 Blossom sect well at all. "The winner of this battle has yet to be determined," said Hope with a smile. "But this is a good thing. I have time to prepare to break through. Morgan is much stronger than I imagined. At my current level, even if I use all my strength, I'm not confident I'll win." "Is he really that strong?" asked the woman, who seemed to have her own doubts about Morgan's strength. "There's only a handful of people in the whole of the 9 continents that I've heard her praise to this extent," she thought. Hope just smiled but said nothing in response. She paused for a few moments and then she said, "That's good. They're from the World Warriors. Even if I had won today, even if I had managed to cripple them, I'm certain it would only have caused trouble for the sect." "But our sect isn't afraid of trouble," said the woman as she raised her eyebrows. The 100 Blossom sect was renowned and well established in the river continent. Crippling a couple of martial artists would be no big deal to them. Hope smiled. "Don't forget that Cahir is part of the World Warriors." The middle-aged woman's mouth twitched at this remark. She had come across Cahir in the heavenly wastelands. He had dug out the bones of dragons, drank their blood, and killed Prince Leroy. Although the 100 Blossom sect was huge, there was no denying it was inferior to the dragon race. "There's a rumor that Cahir is being chased by the Devil sect," said the woman. "One of the sects that Cahir is a member of, 7 Stars Hall, has been wiped out. And it seems his whereabouts are unknown, and that he's been missing for some time now." She paused, and then she grinned and said, "However, it seems that the Devil sect hasn't caught up with him yet." Hope's eyes sparkled as she gazed in the direction from where the 18 young men had departed. She muttered softly, "Cahir is ruthless, and the people around him are very special." Once Morgan and the others had left, silence descended on Crescent City. Everyone gazed up at the sky, and then looked at each other as they tried to work out what had happened.
What's going on? Did Morgan win?
Have they decided the victor or not? Why did Morgan, Raymond, and the others leave?
It didn't look like Hope lost either. This is all so strange.
It looks like no winner has been decided." People continued their animated discussions, and eventually, after a long time had elapsed, everyone dispersed. It had been a most unsatisfactory outcome for the spectators of Crescent City. Not only had they not witnessed the battle, but they also didn't know who had won. However, it was certain that from that day forward, the names of Morgan, Raymond, and the others of Heaven's Guard would be spread throughout the river continent. Morgan had shown himself capable of fighting Hope without losing. That fact alone was loaded with enough information to spread throughout the river continent. The sound of rushing wind could suddenly be heard in the calm sky. The 18 young men who made up Heaven's Guard flew across the sky and landed amid flashes on distant mountains. Randall was on the mountain peak, and he walked toward the group of young men. "So you won?" he asked happily. Over the past few years, Zaid, Anthony, Diego, and Morgan had been training and exploring. Their training level had soared, and they had all begun to exhibit a keen sense of intelligence. "That woman's incredibly strong," Morgan admitted. "Even if I used my full strength, I doubt I'd have the strength to defeat her." He smiled, but it seemed tinged with bitterness. "But if it were a battle to the death, my chances would be better." They were interrupted by the voice of a young man in a brocade robe. He was handsome and had the look of the boy next door, but the smile on his face appeared false, and there was a dangerous look in his eyes. While unknown in the river continent, he was famous in Orchidia. His name was Dimitri. Only those who knew this newcomer well would know how terrifying he could be if he put his mind to it. Rumor had it that some time ago, in Orchidia, a prince had provoked him, and Dimitri had killed him. After that, Orchidia had sent out a search party to hunt him down. In a fit of rage, Dimitri had charged alone into the royal palace and had massacred 100,000 soldiers with his divine ability. He had absorbed the dragon energy and destroyed the entire royal palace. He had even stolen the golden dragon seal. Orchidia was still searching for him, so he had come to the river continent.
Hope is the genius of the 100 Blossom sect, and the leading expert among the younger generation of the river continent,
Dmitri explained.
She was also the leader of the evil spirit's resistance here. She's no ordinary expert, but it's strange that you haven't been able to determine who was the victor between you.
Dmitri, there's always someone better, said Morgan. On this occasion, I simply wasn't good enough. Dmitri smiled.
Apart from the more senior members of the sect, few in your generation would be a match for you. Isn't that right?
As far as he was aware, Heaven's Guard were afraid of no one in the younger generation, let alone the elders. They were terrifying.
You should say that to Cahir sometime,
said Zaid, patting Dmitri on the shoulder.
Cahir,
asked Dmitri with slightly raised eyebrows.
The leader of the 12 heroes who triumphed over Prince Leroy. He's said to be the pinnacle of his generation. Is he really as strong as the rumors say?
He paused for a second and then continued.
If the opportunity presents itself, I'd like to challenge him.
When they heard that, the Silver Fox, Randall, Anthony, Graham, Trevor, Yuma, Zaid, and Morgan burst out laughing. They looked at Dmitri with a mixture of encouragement and respect. Diego stepped forward and patted Dmitri on the shoulder. Your courage is commendable, he said. I remember I once had the same idea as you, but then later on
What happened later on?
Dmitri asked quickly, interrupting him. I gave up, Diego replied simply. I hope you'll be stronger than me. Don't back out at the last moment. Just do your best.
Is that so?
Dmitri asked with a frown. He could feel Diego, Graham, and the others looking at him, and he sensed that something wasn't right. Suddenly, Morgan interrupted.
All right, everyone. We have to return to the central region immediately,
he said.
What's wrong?
Zaid asked. He had long wanted to speak out. Ever since the battle between Morgan and Hope in Crescent City, he had felt something was wrong. Morgan didn't reply straight away. He took out a shard of messenger stone that had been broken into several pieces. On it could vaguely be seen the emblem of a golden-winged bird.
This isn't good, he said. Something must have happened to the World Warriors.
When they saw the shattered messenger stone, Zaid, Randall, the Silver Fox, Anthony, and the others' expressions instantly changed. It was the same messenger stone that Morgan had given to Cahir when they had left the central region. If the messenger stone was broken, it meant that the World Warriors were in trouble, and they had to return as soon as possible.
Let's head to the teleportation array, said Morgan. We must return to the central region as soon as possible.
His fists were clenched tightly by his sides. One after another, they flew into the sky and disappeared over the horizon. In the home of the golden-winged birds, within the collapsed palace inside the secret grounds, the golden lightning was gradually subsiding. The lightning tree continued to release a destructive pressure. Phoenix tattoos covered the entire tree, and the ancient and domineering aura was unstoppable as it continuously devoured the burning thunder. The Thunderbird's body was sparkling and translucent, as bright as the purest gold, and its eyes were filled with shock as it cried out,
"No! No!"
The soul seed of the burning thunder had already been devoured to the limit. If any more of it was devoured, its soul would be destroyed.
"It's too late," said Cahir.
The thunderbolt bloodline in his body devoured the burning thunder, and the lightning tree surged with the extreme pressure that spread out, bringing a magnificent yet desolate aura like that of a supreme being. At that moment, the burning thunder couldn't do anything to stop its own destruction. It was already unable to resist the suppression and was completely exhausted. It could no longer support itself. The lightning tree's lightning arc filled the air. It was as if the tree roots were covering the Thunderbird's body, absorbing its energy. Before long, the Thunderbird was completely withered and shriveled, and it screamed endlessly in despair. When the last wisp of golden lightning was crushed by the lightning tree, the power of the burning thunder's soul seed was also completely devoured. Immediately afterward, the thunder and lightning in the vast space gradually disappeared. The shocking and violent aura of destruction dissipated, and the atmosphere became calm. The violent lightning around the violet lightning cauldron also withdrew. The huge cauldron shrank to about 2 feet in diameter, rotating and hovering in front of Cahir. As the burning thunder's soul seed was completely devoured by the lightning tree, Cahir sat cross-legged. After the Thunderbird was destroyed, the lightning tree transformed into a resplendent gold electric arc that shot into Cahir's forehead. Inside his inner temple, Cahir's eternal spirit sat cross-legged on the purple lightning lotus. His eternal spirit was wrapped in golden electric arcs, and there was a golden arc that represented the burning thunder's soul seed. Cahir formed handprints and activated the mysterious technique to begin fusing the soul seed with his eternal spirit and spirit root. Since he had already successfully merged himself with 2 types of celestial lightning, he didn't encounter much difficulty fusing with a third, smoothly completing the process. The soul seed contained a huge amount of information about the burning thunder, and Kahir realized just how powerful that type of celestial lightning was. Any ordinary martial artist would have had a very difficult time absorbing and refining its energy, but unfortunately for the burning thunder, it had encountered Kahir, who had a thunderbolt bloodline, had been strengthened by the violet lightning cauldron, and had already fused with the soul seeds of 2 other kinds of celestial lightning. In addition, by the time Kahir had encountered it, the burning thunder had already been trapped for thousands of years, and its energy had been depleted, making it easier for Kahir to defeat it. Although it had been unable to advance its training for quite some time, it was still at the elementary level of the domination stage, making it extremely valuable to Kahir. He had obtained great benefits by fusing its soul seed with his eternal spirit. Not long afterward, the eternal spirit power in Kahir's inner temple began to increase at an astonishing rate. Waves of aura fluctuations were emitted from the center of his brows as he finished merging the celestial lightning with his spirit root. That amount of energy would have made an ordinary spirit talisman master explode, but Kahir was able to withstand it because of his extraordinary eternal spirit. Vast and boundless eternal spirit power swept out from Kahir as his spirit root, the silver soul thunder, the earth-shattering thunder, and the burning thunder all combined. If there had been other spirit talisman masters present at that moment, they would have been shocked to witness Kahir's extraordinary eternal spirit power. Even more terrifying was that it still continued to increase as he finished refining the last of the burning thunder's energy. Not only did the burning thunder not hurt Kahir in any way, but it had helped him transform and get stronger once again. The mountain range continued as far as the eye could see, and the clouds were dense. There were also extraordinary healing medicines everywhere, and the energy of heaven and earth was overwhelming. Early in the morning on the mountain peak, Alexis had her eyes tightly closed, and a dazzling white light surrounded her entire body. Waves of vast pressure spread out, and ripples of the energy of heaven and earth lingered on the mountain peak and connected to her. It seemed as if that process had been going on for a very long time. Alexis frowned slightly and sat up gracefully. The light around her body was like hazy smoke. As she was enveloped in the energy of heaven and earth, a force that caused her eternal spirit to tremble rose from her body. Suddenly, a muffled sound was heard as her aura broke through a bottleneck, and her aura reached a new level. At the same time, a wave of space appeared in the sky, with Alexis at the center from where space ripples exploded. From the center of her brows, circles of light also shot out, and a vast eternal spirit power swept in all directions like lightning. On a mountain not far away, a young woman dressed in cyan clothes suddenly looked up in shock. "Alexis has successfully broken through," Harley murmured. In the sky, the vast eternal spirit power swept over like a tidal wave, the aura ancient and terrifying, making the whole world tremble. The wave continued, and as Harley watched, Alexis's eternal spirit appeared. She appeared so pure that it made people feel as if she wasn't from the mortal world, and the light in her eyes was so bright that most wouldn't have dared look at her. "Her eternal spirit is so powerful," Harley thought. Up in the sky, Alexis's eternal spirit looked around curiously before slowly descending, turning into a ball of blinding light, and then rushing into Alexis's forehead. Alexis trembled slightly, and the terrifying eternal spirit power spreading out from her body began to fade. The energy of heaven and earth that had been lingering for a long time above the surrounding mountain peaks also began to weaken. Finally, it completely surrounded Alexis and became faint and illusory. Once the last wisp of the energy of heaven and earth had rushed into her body, she opened her eyes. A bright light surged from her eyes, and her aura swept out, shaking the space in all directions. In an instant, the bright light faded, and her eyes became clear again. As she sensed everything about her body, she stretched out her hands to form seals. In a matter of seconds, she condensed 36 array flags in front of her. The array flags emitted shocking fluctuations and caused the space in front of them to distort, revealing traces of pitch-black spatial cracks. The 36 array flags were the sign of a 9-star spirit talisman master. Alexis was only in her early 20s, and yet had already become a 9-star spirit talisman master. Few people in all of the 9 continents were talented enough to reach such a level. Indeed, comparing the top experts of the younger generation of the 9 continents to Alexis was like comparing apples and oranges, and such comparisons wouldn't please those experts, as they would only look vastly inferior. It was difficult to understand how Alexis's training level had increased so quickly and her natural talent was difficult to comprehend. It was enough to make even the most talented among her peers simply want to give up. The 36 array flag slowly faded into Alexis's hands before vanishing completely. "I've finally broken through. I'm a 9-star Spirit Talisman Master," she muttered. She slowly stood up, fully revealing her grace and beauty. "Congratulations on your breakthrough," Harley said, appearing beside Alexis. She sounded genuinely happy. "Thank you," Alexis replied. "I was afraid that if I hadn't managed it this time, my master would scold me again." She smiled, and her face lit up with joy. Just then, a beautiful woman in a plain dress suddenly appeared in front of Alexis and Harley. "Could it be that you don't want to see your master?" she said coldly. It was Meredith. "Master, what are you doing here?" Alexis asked. As soon as she saw her, she took her arm. "I've missed you." "Greetings, ma'am," said Harley as she looked at the beautiful new arrival. Then she moved respectfully to one side. "Did you really miss me, or are you just in a hurry to leave?" Meredith asked, rolling her eyes. Her expression was a little cold, but there was no mistaking her love and admiration. "So much time has passed, and following your breakthrough, you're now a 9-star Spirit Talisman Master. You're now skilled enough to leave the mountain. This is a huge benefit." "Thank you, Master," responded Alexis happily. She had grown into a beautiful and graceful young woman. "Don't get too excited," warned Meredith in a solemn voice. "The great calamity of the world is coming, and you must be on your guard against the people from the Devil Sect. Even the power of a 9-star Spirit Talisman Master is barely enough. You need to be careful." She paused, and then she added, "Also, I have a mission for you." "I'll do my best to complete any task you set me," replied Alexis. She was so happy about finally being able to go back out into the world that she agreed without hesitating. "When you leave, look for someone called Father Nathan. Capture him and bring him to me," Meredith instructed. "Who is he?" Alexis asked, full of curiosity. "He's a cunning old bastard. If you do meet him, don't be fooled by him. Just bring him straight to me," Meredith said. Alexis nodded and asked no further questions. Her gaze was fixed straight ahead as she thought, "I'll see my aunt in Kahir again soon." In a majestic mountain range, the trees were lush and green, covering many of the buildings. Although it was morning, a few stars could be seen scattered through the pale blue sky that was shaded red on the horizon by the brilliant morning sun. A thin mist shrouded the mountains like a veil, and on the mountain peaks, the energy of heaven and earth fluctuated as if a storm had just passed. The sound of wind and thunder resounded, and a vast and indistinct aura surged, causing the surrounding space to tremble and freeze. Olivia stood in the air with her beautiful face tilted upward, and her eyes closed. She wore fitted clothing that complemented her perfect figure. Suddenly, a dazzling spirit sword appeared in front of her. Her eyes opened, and a bright light shot out straight up into the sky like a solid pillar, and her aura swept out like a raging storm. After years of training, she had finally stepped into the enlightenment level of the martial sovereign stage. Olivia stretched out her hand and picked up the spirit sword. The vast nether energy swept out, and the pressure spread in all directions. It was as if she could shatter the space and kill everyone by just raising her arm. Just as she grasped the spirit sword, an old man appeared in the air before her. His hair was disheveled, and his appearance was unkempt, but his eyes were as deep as the sea as he looked at Olivia. "It seems you've already gotten the spirit sword to recognize you as its master, and have obtained the benefits you needed to break through to the enlightenment level of the martial sovereign stage. Not bad at all," he said approvingly. "It seems my efforts to train you haven't gone to waste. Although you started at a disadvantage, you've shown great perseverance and willpower. It's not beyond the realm of possibility that you'll catch up with everyone else one day." As soon as she laid eyes on the slovenly old man, her face lit up, and she spoke gently to him. "Do you mean that I can leave the mountain?" she asked as she landed beside him. "Don't even think about it," the old man harshly responded. "I've told you before that the great calamity is coming. With your current training level, it isn't safe for you to leave. Wait until you break through to the martial domination stage, and then you'll be strong enough to leave." "Martial domination stage?" Olivia repeated, and she pouted. "What was that?" asked the old man sharply. Then his eyes flickered as if he had sensed something. The next moment, the old man disappeared from Olivia's side, and an angry shout rang out. "Father Nathan, you old bastard! You still dare come to steal from me?
I won't let you escape this time."
"Are you crazy? What can you do to me?" Father Nathan retorted.
"In any case, you'll never be able to catch up with me. You're far too slow." "Father Nathan, I'm not done with you," the slovenly old man yelled. "No matter where you go, you'll never escape."
Olivia stood stunned on the mountain peak for a moment, looking at the space where her master had reappeared briefly before disappearing again. Then her eyes narrowed, and a strange smile appeared on her face. "I should be able to leave the mountain in secret," she thought. "I'll just have to make sure to return before my master does." In the sky above a mountain range with an ancient aura, flames of blue and red gathered like a sea of fire. Lightning flashed, thunder rumbled, and the energy of heaven and earth whistled like a tide. Above the terrifying sea of flames, a colorful giant bird phantom appeared. It was like a phoenix, a crane, and a luan combined. It stood on one leg and was covered in gorgeous red and blue feathers. At that moment, a terrifying pressure suddenly descended upon the mountains, and birds and beasts roared and trembled. Among the strange birds and beasts was a heavenly dog that looked like a leopard with white fur and the ability to suppress all evil. There was also a creature that looked like a horse with white fur and a red tail, known as a little deer. These strange birds and beasts were suppressed to the point that they prostrated on the ground. The huge bird phantom suddenly flapped its wings, creating a hot and violent breeze before it transformed into a whirlwind of flames and caused the surrounding space to distort, as if it could burn all things to ashes. On a nearby mountain, many young men and women looked on. They were plainly dressed, but all possessed extraordinary auras. They felt the pressure and watched the commotion in shock.
"Arissa is quite terrifying. She actually broke through to the beast domination stage," someone commented. "Arissa's true form is the divine bird. The bloodline in her body seems to have mutated a little, and she's also obtained the inheritance of the ancient divine bird expert from my sect. A few elders in the sect also favor her, so naturally she benefits quite a lot," explained a plainly dressed young man. His name was Zeke, and he was among the most outstanding martial artists in the younger generation of his sect. Besides Zeke, a beautiful woman spoke. She was simply but elegantly dressed, and her aura was pure. "Arissa is terrifying, but the king demon tiger and that monkey Charlie are also incredibly strong, especially Charlie. Even Leanne was impressed with him," she said. As soon as the woman had uttered the last words, an irritated voice rang out. "Why does everyone call me a monkey? Just because one of my forms is a red monkey doesn't mean I'm a monkey."
A young man dressed in gold-colored clothes emerged. He looked to be around 25 or 26 years old, and he had handsome, chiseled features. He wore a constant smile and emitted a king's aura capable of shaking the world. The woman turned around to look at the young man. His gold-colored hair was draped over his shoulders, and he was tall and slender. He had thick brows and long eyelashes, and his eyes were a mesmerizing golden color that seemed capable of capturing one's soul. His skin faintly sparkled, as if covered in a light golden luster. As the woman looked at the young man, her heart skipped a beat, but she quickly came to her senses. "The red monkey is a type of monkey. Accept it. You're a monkey. Anyway, give me back my heavenly peach." When he heard that, Charlie pouted, and his aura immediately weakened. However, he couldn't conceal his heroic bearing. He looked around for an excuse to leave, and his gaze landed on a young man in black not far away. The man was tall and sturdy, with handsome features and deep black eyes. It was the king demon tiger.
"Hey, what are you doing here? I've been looking for you,"
Charlie shouted, hurrying over to him. "Why were you looking for me, monkey?" he asked.
"You stupid tiger," Charlie said. "You're now at the enlightenment level of the beast sovereign stage, but you're just as stupid as before. If you call me a monkey again, there'll be hell to pay," he said, glaring at the king demon tiger. The king demon tiger clicked his tongue. "Is a red monkey really a monkey, or is it a horse?" he asked. Many of the youths within earshot laughed when they heard that. "How dare you!"
Charlie shouted. He was so angry that he stomped his feet. He stared at the king demon tiger and said,
"I won't forget this. Don't bother asking me for help with anything ever again."
"I'm sorry," the king demon tiger said. "I was wrong, okay?" And then he braced himself, stepped forward, and forced a smile. While Charlie and the king demon tiger were arguing, the divine bird phantom started to lose its solid shape and coalesced into a cluster of light. It burned in shades of turquoise and red, and everywhere around it a sea of flames set the sky on fire. After a few moments of intense conflagration,
The energy started to dim, and another shape emerged from the flames. Everyone recognized that the divine bird had re-emerged, but it looked different. Its new form was that of a crane-like phoenix, whose entire body was covered in red stripes and gorgeous cyan-colored feathers. As it spread out its wings and descended toward the ground, it sent out a burst of pressure that weakened the knees of everyone below. Zeke stared at the divine bird. Its new body was clearly much stronger than its previous form, and he couldn't take his eyes off it. Neither could anyone else. Many of the strange birds and beasts cried out in dismay, and they felt a tremor run through their souls. The divine bird's new form stretched out its long neck and raised its head toward the sky. It stood upright in the air, seemingly without needing to flap its wings, and its internal fires blazed. Gusts of violent wind spread its heat out into the air, burning the air around it and threatening to scorch anything that came too close. A moment later, the flowing energies in the sky became attracted to the divine bird, and they seeped out of the clouds and down toward it. The energies surged into the bird's giant body, increasing the luster of its colors, and then re-emerged as a dense mist. The haze gathered in an oblong cluster about 10 feet tall and started to morph into the shape of a woman. It was Arissa. Her pose was strikingly graceful, and her black hair lay draped over her shoulders like a cascading waterfall. When the last of the mist flowed into her, her entire body beamed with strange power. She looked no older than she had before, but her face shone with maturity and wisdom. She was mesmerizing. Her long eyelashes trembled slightly, and in the next moment she opened her tightly shut eyes. They were a strange mix of cyan and red, the same colors as the giant divine bird, and the light in them flowed into the heavens. The clouds roiled when the heat of her internal fire struck them, and her aura blanketed the ground as far as the eye could see. Even on faraway mountaintops, strange birds and beasts cried out in dismay. The king demon tiger's dark eyes were filled with envy as he looked at her. "Arissa has reached the beast domination stage," he muttered. "I wonder when I'll be able to reach that level." Charlie, who was in his human form and dressed in a golden robe, stared at Arissa. He could hardly believe it was her. But when the fire in her eyes calmed and the bright colors around her dimmed, he realized she was the same person she had always been. He leapt into the air and flew up to her, smiling widely as he approached. He was excited to find out how she had developed.
"Arissa,"
he called out.
"Congratulations on breaking through. I can't believe how quickly you did it."
She smiled at him, and her smile was like the opening of a wonderful white flower. When she looked at him, he felt a strange kind of bliss.
"Don't be too impressed," she said. "You're also very strong. Even Leanne thinks so. She told me."
Charlie laughed.
"Of course I am. After all, I'm a red monkey."
He paused to smile cheekily at her.
"Well, now that you've broken through, I can't wait to find out how far Kahir's gotten. We should go and find him, and maybe we'd actually be able to push him around for a change."
Arissa glared at him, but it was clear that she was feigning her offense. She quickly lost her facade and broke into a blissful smile. Her dark eyes switched between glee and displeasure at what Charlie had said.
"You shouldn't say things like that,"
she scoffed, half smiling.
"But don't worry, I won't make you pay for that comment, even though I definitely could."
Charlie met her gaze. Even though he knew she was only half serious, her reflective preference for Kahir bothered him a little.
"Arissa, I'm your family too, aren't I?" he asked. "You should treat us a little more equally."
"I do," she shot back. Charlie smiled again, and Arissa shook her head. Then she furrowed her brow as if she had thought of something. Her eyes glimmered with focused intent as she met Charlie's gaze.
"I want to see my brother," she said, "and Olivia, and everyone else."
Charlie's smile faded, and without intending to, he diverted his eyes back toward the ground.
"You've reached a whole new level of power," he answered. "That old man couldn't stop you from leaving now, could he?"
Arissa frowned.
"He's an elder of my sect. If he hears that you're being disrespectful to him, you'll pay for it."
Charlie looked back at her and felt a twinge of fear. Then he gave a faint, complacent smile.
"What's the worst that could happen? If push comes to shove, I'll just run away and hide for a little while. He might not be able to take a joke, but I can withstand some alone time."
"Like last time?" she asked. "I don't know if I'd call half a year a little while." He rolled his eyes and sighed.
"That was different. Just let it go."
"I have to go and talk to Leanne," Arissa said rather abruptly. She had moved on to other concerns.
I want to go back and see Kahir and the others.
Charlie laughed.
Great. I've spent enough time here anyway. We should leave.
They both laughed and started floating down to the ground. It was time to go home. Meanwhile, among the mountains on the other side of the long river of the central region, a huge number of demon beasts came flying through the mountain passes and landed in a clearing. The surrounding forest shook as they touched down, and the trees shuddered from the sound of their roars. The beasts were mounts of the major forces in the central region, and they brought warriors of the evil spirits' resistance to their gathering. The evil spirits' resistance had occupied and patrolled the mountain range for a long time, and even the most disciplined warriors were getting restless. Some had started to complain openly that nothing was happening, especially the younger fighters, who made up most of the army. They were in their prime fighting years, and many of them had started to wonder if they would ever see battle. The army of the evil spirits' resistance was led by experts from all the major forces, and the elite warriors of the younger generation had been spread out to act as leaders. They were responsible for training the less accomplished fighters, and they were tasked with keeping them in line. Of course, they knew that training could never really prepare the disciples for battle against the evil spirits. The evil spirits that had come into the central region were on a level different from those that had attacked the other 8 continents. Even though places like Orchidia and the River Continent had struggled to deal with their evil spirit invasions, the ones in the central region were stronger and even more wicked. For that reason, the major powers had sent out an enormous number of troops to deal with the threat. The frontline warriors were led by established martial artists, which allowed the best of the disciples to spend their time training their less accomplished compatriots. The trainers could afford to take their time. The combined army of the evil spirits' resistance in the central region was large enough that it would probably never run out of soldiers, and they had already chased the evil spirits out of most of the central region. When they had advanced to the Long River, however, they had faced a problem. The area on the other side of the river was controlled by the World Warriors and the Jade Empire, and they wouldn't allow the assembled army to pass into their lands. They wanted to eradicate the evil spirits on their own. Even the ancient Sky Sect and the Talismans were against allowing the army to join them. Their refusal to accept help had caused anger among Spirit Sky Valley, the Blue Wolves, and the Serpentine Sect, who wanted the army to disregard any opposition and move forward to eradicate the evil spirits. Meanwhile, the Celestial Titans, the Immortals, the Blazing Swords, and the Hellfire Sect were more cautious. They had stayed neutral in the conflict. The result was that the army of the resistance had stayed bottled up in the mountains along the Long River. Since they had been forced to stay there for so long, they had constructed several training grounds, and many areas had been set aside for trade and the resources they needed for the fight. The trading areas had grown so large that the soldiers could find anything they needed there. Merchants came with pills, weapons, medicines, scrolls that taught martial arts techniques, secret bones, blood essences, and much more. The marketplace bustled with activity day and night, and every major power had set out guards in order to keep conflicts from breaking out. One particular place in the market area was more popular than any other. A world pavilion had been set up there, and everyone knew that more precious goods could be found there than anywhere else. The world pavilion that had been set up in the mountains was similar to the others that existed across the central region. Its main purpose was to buy and sell various resources that martial artists might need, such as various pills, weapons, and puppets. The pills sold by the World Pavilion were especially desirable. The Vitality Pill, the Insanity Pill, and the Spirit Pill were all highly sought after, and they came in different strengths according to the level of the martial artist taking them. Their prices varied widely across different levels, and even the cheapest of them were already at least 20 times more expensive than most other pills. Of course, that was on the legal market. On the black market, the prices could be twice as high, since the supply was so low. The profits were immense, since the effects of the pill were so desirable. The Vitality Pill allowed a person to tap into their full potential over a short period of time, and it also allowed injured warriors to recover their strength after a fight. The Insanity Pill did the same, but it also allowed the martial artist to access a higher training level for a brief time. The Spirit Pill increased the spirit force of the person who took it, which made it the most potent of the 3 pills. Spirit Force was the most difficult thing of all to increase on one's own, and a spirit pill was often over 10 times more effective than similar medicine. Like other medicine, the 3 pills could cause damage to the body if they were used too often, a fact which only made them more sought after. The weapons sold by the World Pavilion were also vastly superior to the weapons sold in other places. Those of the highest quality could split lesser weapons in 2 with a single strike, and many of them had inscriptions that carried extra power. The World Pavilion charged exorbitantly for their weapons, and few could afford to buy them. The World Pavilion also sold puppets, which made it stand out among the vendors of the 9 continents. Artifact masters who could create puppets were few and far between, and puppets weren't just expensive, they were impossible for most people to acquire. Puppets came in levels that matched the levels of martial artists, but they were more powerful than equivalent fighters, at least in terms of physical strength. For example, a king stage puppet was much stronger than a martial king stage expert, and its price was therefore higher than a martial king stage expert could afford. Lower stage fighters never bought puppets, since the money was better spent improving their own skills, and warriors usually reached the martial emperor stage before they even thought about buying one. Even so, an emperor stage puppet was even more expensive, and few could afford one. The dynamic ensured that puppets were almost never sold. The few buyers were usually powerful organizations that wanted extra protection for their disciples. However, the limited sales and availability only increased the status of artifact masters. As one of the most highly skilled artifact masters, Tarkin was famous throughout the central region, and everyone admired his skills. In fact, Tarkin was a special case. Before him, many had assumed that artifact masters couldn't be powerful warriors, since all they did was construct external fighting aids. Tarkin had proved them wrong, and he had become as famous for his prowess as for his craftsmanship. Of course, he was still most famous for his skill in crafting puppets. His creations were capable of instantly destroying other puppets at the same level, and he had built king-stage puppets that could stand up to martial emperor stage experts. His creations were the most coveted puppets of all, but there weren't many of them, and the few that existed were almost priceless. Tarkin's fame wasn't entirely positive for him. There were rumors that many top sects in the central region fantasized about capturing him and forcing him to make puppets for them. Everyone knew that Tarkin's skill in battle and his craftsmanship would be an immense advantage for any sect. If an entire army of his puppets could be called forth into battle, no one would be able to stand against it. Even demon beasts would have trouble doing so. Demon beasts were powerful, fierce, and bloodthirsty beyond human capacity, and they weren't afraid of death. Everyone knew that a demon beast army would sweep aside a comparably sized human one, but puppets would be a different story. The puppets sold by the World Pavilion were said to be roughly on the level of Tarkin's, and its assortment of pills, weapons, and puppets had made it justly famous. The ancient Sky Sect shared in that fame, since most of the World Pavilion's goods came from them. Spirit Talisman Masters came from the other major powers to purchase the formulas to make the pills, but Philip always turned them down. He did the same when they asked for the secrets to crafting the weapons and the puppets. Sometimes Philip was tempted by the treasures that the other powers offered, but he wasn't a fool. He knew that the secrets of his sect were priceless advantages that vastly increased their influence in the central region. Besides, Philip couldn't have sold all the secrets even if he had wanted to. The other powers didn't know about it, but the ancient Sky Sect didn't make as many of the items in the World Pavilion as people thought. The World Pavilion acquired many items, especially the pills, on their own. They were closely entwined with the ancient Sky Sect, but they were still separate entities. The partnership had benefited the ancient Sky Sect immensely. The World Pavilion had allowed them to raise themselves above other sects, and they had gotten preferential access to pills, weapons, puppets, and other resources that the pavilion could provide. Using these advantages, they were able to dominate the Blue Wolves and the other 8 major powers. Even Spirit Sky Valley, which had previously been the strongest power, had gradually been supplanted. It had taken just a few short years for the ancient Sky Sect to raise themselves into a dominant position, and it was their trade with the World Pavilion that allowed them to do so. Their rise had inspired others to try to deduce the formulas for the pills, but the replicas were never as potent as the originals. Kahir was among the few who knew the original formulas for the vitality pills, insanity pills, and spirit pills. He had gotten them from Ralph, who had stumbled upon them by accident, and he wasn't going to reveal the secret. For the time being, the dominance of the ancient sky sect was assured. The appearance of a world pavilion in the army's marketplace had shocked everyone, and the clamor had only increased once they revealed the wide array of items they were selling. Fierce competition arose to see who could buy the most expensive and sought-after items. Throughout, everyone kept believing that the World Pavilion was owned and operated by the ancient sky sect, and none of them suspected the truth. The power behind the World Pavilion was actually a single person, Kahir. George was the face of the World Pavilion's activities in the army camp, and the news that he was selling insanity pills and vitality pills spread like wildfire. Many people took it as proof that the World Pavilion was a front for the ancient sky sect, and others suspected that the whole thing was a scam. Since the pills were rare, and many counterfeit versions circulated, George's items might just as well have been cheap copies. Those suspicions vanished once some people bought the pills and testified that they had worked. The testimonies confirmed the quality of the weapons and puppets as well, and the World Pavilion's reputation grew red hot. Everyone wanted to see what was available, and since the stores were limited, long lines materialized outside the pavilion's entrance. The market became a scene of perpetual chaos. George and Grayson found themselves at the center of the whirlwind, and their names were on everyone's lips. Compared to other young warriors like Stefan, Sansa, Ani, Jamie, and many others, George and Grayson weren't very strong, but they were just as well known. Their status as artifact masters ensured their popularity, and their reputations had started to grow even before the establishment of the evil spirit's resistance. The reason for Grayson's fame was simple. He had become the main artifact master of the World Pavilion, and he was seen as responsible for the quality of its weapons. Rumor had it that he crafted weapons at least 5 times faster than other martial artists of the same level, and the weapons he made were more powerful. Another rumor said that Grayson had crafted an immensely powerful weapon for the ancient sky sect, a weapon that they apparently couldn't make for themselves. That rumor had given him a new nickname, and Grayson had become known as the artifact tyrant in the rest of the world. George's rise to fame had been even more dramatic, since unlike Grayson, he had been completely unknown. The Spirit Talisman Master competition that was held once every 50 years in Spirit Sky Valley had changed things, however. They had both entered the contest to become the champion artifact master, and even though Grayson had performed admirably, it was George who had won by refining a puppet and defeating an expert at the edge level of the Martial Sovereign stage. Everyone had been stunned, and his fame had skyrocketed in an instant. Much later, the news had spread that George was the person in charge of the World Pavilion. Once that became known, everyone soon found out that it was he who had created the puppets that the pavilion sold. His fame had grown even more after that, and he had become one of the most well-regarded young martial artists in the ancient sky sect. His skills at crafting puppets had made him even more famous than Grayson. He had crafted countless puppets over the years, and all of them had astonishing power. Other artifact masters from the major powers sought George out and tried to probe his mind for advice. Their obsequiousness had made him feel awkward, but it had also amused him. The fact that famous artifact masters came to seek guidance from a disciple had contributed to the prestige of the ancient sky sect, and the elders had started to treat George with immense respect. He was no longer a simple disciple. He was a puppet grand master, and his status was comparable to that of people like Leslie and Dylan, even though it sprang from a very different source. He couldn't compete with them in terms of raw strength, but in many ways, his future looked more promising than theirs. Even though Leslie and Dylan were 2 of the most promising warriors in the ancient sky sect, and were known throughout the central region, George and Grayson were just as famous as they were. Their proficiency in training soldiers and crafting puppets was second to none in the entire central region. It was almost sunset, and the white clouds in the sky were tinged with the golden light of the setting sun. The marketplace in the army camp was still bustling with people, and on a nearby hilltop, a group of about 20 people stood watching. The last light of the sun landed on their backs, and their long shadows lay stretched out in front of them. Among the 20 or so extraordinary young men and women were Harvey, Tamsin, Jaden, Neo, Reese, and Murray. The entire group were martial king stage warriors of the ancient Sky Sect, and they had something else in common. They were all members of the World Pavilion. George and Grayson stood in front of the others, and they were all observing what was going on in the marketplace. Harvey, Tamsin, Neo, Reese, and Murray's abilities had advanced by leaps and bounds in the last few years. They had gained a tremendous amount of experience, and their reputations in the rest of the world had grown. They had all become confident young warriors. Jaden stood looking at the marketplace in front of her. Her whole body boiled with a powerful aura. "Many in the evil spirits resistance can't wait to cross the river," she said. "Perhaps we shouldn't sell off the World Pavilion's entire stock. It might be good to keep some for ourselves, in case there's a battle." Tamsin took a step forward and stood by Jaden's side. She wore a form-fitting suit of mobile armor, with a small scimitar hung in a scabbard on each of her hips. Her blonde hair shone in the twilight, and her eyes glimmered like those of a cunning predator. "We should sell what we can," she said. "If we don't, it'll be a long time before we have another chance." "Whatever happens, it'll happen tomorrow," Grayson said. "I wonder what decision the commanders will make." Jaden sighed. She was clearly worried. "If we sell the puppets, we'll have put ourselves at a disadvantage," she countered. "The World Warriors and the Evil Spirits Resistance could go to war tomorrow." Grayson smiled faintly and looked away. George, who was standing beside him, turned back to look at Jaden and said, "So be it." Jaden met his eyes and reflected on how much he had changed. His frame had grown thicker and sturdier, and his eyes were filled with purpose. Even though he was still thin compared to his compatriots, he exuded an aura of strength and power, and many found his presence intimidating. Over the last few years, George had led the World Pavilion to a place of strength it had never enjoyed before. Everyone outside the organization knew that they possessed vastly more resources than in the past, but no one knew exactly how strong they were. That ignorance was a major benefit for the World Pavilion, since it made all potential adversaries wary of attacking them. "Let them buy whatever they want," George continued. "The more we sell, the better." He turned back to the marketplace and let his eyes wander over the people in the streets. "If the Evil Spirits Resistance starts a war with the World Warriors tomorrow, it was fated to happen. Whatever happens, we'll deal with it. Until then, it doesn't matter what we do." "I wonder where the Guildmaster is," one of the others said. "If he were here, I doubt that Stefan would do anything rash." "Don't worry," Harvey said. "Cahir will be fine. When he comes back, Stefan won't be able to do anything. The Divine Court will be totally destroyed." He laughed, and his heavy frame and thick robes bounced with the rhythm of his laughter. He was more worried for Cahir than he wanted to show, but he also believed in him honestly. He knew that Cahir had what it took to survive on his own, and the day he returned to the Central Region would be the day the Divine Court ran out of luck. Stefan was living on borrowed time. Night fell, and the light of the full moon bathed the army camp in a veil of ethereal light. Once the sun disappeared completely, a barrier fell soundlessly around the edges of the camp, preventing anyone but the very strongest from entering and shielding the army in an invisible cocoon. The lights went out in most of the tents as people went to sleep, but one tent remained illuminated. It was a large command tent placed on a hill, away from the main encampment, and no less than 200 people had gathered inside. A few of the most senior elders had seats, but most of the people were standing in a crowd that ran along the tent's walls. Jamie, Ani, Sansa, Nadir, Dylan, and Leslie were all there, as were the rest of the most distinguished fighters in the Central Region. Darwin and Quinn sat among the elders, and close to them sat Ivan of the Blue Wolves, Gerwin of the Celestial Titans, and many others. In that moment, every eye inside the tent was drawn to one particular person. Stefan was standing in the open space at the center of the tent, defying the gaze of every elder around him and shining with prideful arrogance. He had been made leader of the evil spirits resistance in the central region, and his status had risen immensely. The atmosphere in the tent was thick with tension as everyone waited for him to speak. Many of the elders looked at Stefan with troubled faces, while others sat with their eyes closed, as if the outside world didn't concern them at all. Darwin was one of those who sat meditating. He was leaning back in his chair, and both his body and his aura were perfectly relaxed. Stefan's gaze swept over the assembled crowd. He sneered derisively, and then he spoke.
Everyone, tomorrow is the day. The World Warriors and the Jade Empire have denied us access to the lands across the Long River. They must have some ulterior motive for doing so, and tonight we must discuss what to do about it.
There's someone else who has an ulterior motive, Quinn shouted. The Resistance had the strength and manpower to quickly wipe the evil spirits from our lands, but you dragged your feet and let them enter the Jade Empire. You've used the evil spirits to weaken both the Jade Empire and the World Warriors. It's no wonder they don't want you in their lands.
Stefan spun around to glare at Quinn, who met his smoldering gaze and continued.
I know why you're doing this, Stefan. While Kahir was here, he was keeping you in line. You're using his absence to launch a sneak attack and increase your own position. Please don't treat everyone here like fools.
Some of those listening to Quinn's words were shocked, and a confused murmur broke out. However, it soon became clear to the few who were particularly surprised by the accusations against Stefan. They all knew who he was, and it wasn't the first time Quinn had argued with him. Nevertheless, Stefan was enraged. He found Quinn's obstinance annoying, and the mention of Kahir's name never failed to make him angry. He quickly calmed himself, however. He had been working on his temper, and he knew that flying into a rage wouldn't help him.
I don't know why you insist on sowing discord among us,
he shot back at Quinn, as he let his eyes wander across the other elders.
The evil spirits resistance was set up to clear the evil spirits out of the central region. Some among us seem to have forgotten that, but I certainly haven't.
He sighed softly and kept searching the room with his eyes. Finally, his gaze fell on the representatives of the Immortals, the Blazing Swords, the Celestial Titans, and the Hellfire Sect. He tried to conceal his glee, but he couldn't help but smile. Jordan straightened up and cleared his throat.
You're right, he said. Our responsibility is to wipe away the evil spirits. That's why we're here. I don't know why we're talking about other things.
He browsed the crowd with eyes that glimmered like stars in a clear sky, and the scars on his face burned violently. Some people had to look away when he met their gaze, and no one seemed willing to contradict him. He turned back to Stefan and continued.
However, if the World Warriors and the Jade Empire have the ability to destroy the evil spirits on their own, we don't need to participate. We can stay put and wait to see if we need to step in.
Everyone listened intently to what Jordan said, and many nodded along with his words. They knew that he was speaking for the Immortals, which gave his opinion serious weight, and his sentiment sounded reasonable. In the part of the tent where the talismans were assembled, Sansa stepped forward. Without saying a word, she compelled everyone to turn and listen to her. They all knew that she was close to Kahir, which meant that she also spoke on behalf of the World Warriors. "You're right," she said. "If the World Warriors and the Jade Empire can handle things themselves, our army doesn't need to cross the river. I'm afraid anyone who urges us to do so might have ill intentions." Darvo stood behind Sansa. He didn't say anything, but his presence was extraordinary, and his eyes were unfathomably deep. The sight of him filled everyone who listened to Sansa with awe. Nobody knew how, but Darvos had made incredible advances in his training in the last few years. He had grown to become the leader of the Talisman's young warriors. Most people considered him at least equal to Sansa, and he had defeated Dylan in the competition to decide the leadership of the evil spirit's resistance. Even though he hadn't ultimately become the leader, his defeat of Dylan had shocked everyone. Stefan smiled faintly as he looked at them, and his eyes rippled with malicious light. It was obvious that he had something planned.
"I know why you're all worried," he said. I know that some of you are suspicious of my motives, but I want you all to know that you have no reason to suspect me of anything. In fact, you'll find that those who work against me are doing so for their own gain. Now, I have something to show you." As his voice faded, Stefan waved his arms in the air, and his hands emerged out of his sleeves. His right palm started to glow with an increasingly bright light, and everyone watched in awe as a space ripple appeared. The elders, who had kept their eyes closed, seemed to sense what was happening, and the spectacle brought them out of their trance. All of them, including Darwin, opened their eyes at the same time, and without needing to adjust their line of sight, they found themselves staring straight at the space ripple. Two shadowy figures appeared, growing larger and larger with every second. The two shadowy figures grew more and more concrete, and as their shapes became firmer, a deathly aura flooded the tent. Everyone was taken aback by their appearance. One of them was a thin, black-robed, middle-aged man whose blood-red eyes shone menacingly under the rim of his black hat. The other was also clothed entirely in black, but his robe sat tighter around his body. He was also distinguishable by his mane of fiery red hair, which matched the color of his eyes. Both figures seethed with an undercurrent of murderous rage, but they seemed to be kept in check by an invisible force. The looks in their eyes implied that they wanted to lash out and go on a rampage, but they couldn't. They were trapped in a bubble and couldn't even make a sound. Every eye in the tent was fixed on the strange beings, and Quinn was one of the few who recognized them immediately. They were Hank and Sean. "It's the evil spirits," someone cried in a half-panic. "Look how fierce they seem." The tent erupted in a restless murmur, and Stefan looked around. He seemed extremely satisfied with the reaction he had gotten. When he turned to look at Quinn, he had a cold glimmer in his eyes. "Yes, Quinn, these are two evil spirits," Ivan suddenly cried. "But I suppose you're familiar with them already. Would you like to enlighten the rest of us?" Every face in the tent spun around to look at Quinn. Ivan's words had the intended effect, and everyone in the tent wanted to hear Quinn's explanation. "There's nothing to explain," Quinn retorted. "It seems the Blue Wolves are intent on attacking the World Warriors. These two have nothing to do with anything." Ivan snorted coldly. "Knock it off, Quinn. These two evil spirits serve the World Warriors. One of them is called Sean, and the other is called Hank. Do you deny it? The World Warriors said they were going to purge the evil spirits, but in reality they've given them sanctuary. The evil spirits that have attacked the Central Region might all come from the World Warriors, and if you're covering for them, I guess the ancient Sky Sect had something to do with it. I could only assume that your plan was to let the evil spirits wreak havoc in the Central Region for your own benefit." Ivan's accusation struck the assembled crowd like a thunderbolt. Nobody dared say a word, but the tension made many of them tremble. They were on pins and needles, waiting for Quinn to respond to the allegation. "Total nonsense," Quinn barked. "It's true that these two are evil spirits called Hank and Sean, but they're harmless. Kahir managed to subdue them, and they've pledged to serve him. They've never done any damage to the Central Region, and they have nothing to do with the other evil spirits. You're clearly trying to frame the World Warriors." Quinn was enraged. He had heard from the World Warriors that the Blue Wolves had captured Hank and Sean days earlier, but he hadn't been able to guess their intentions. Everything had suddenly been made crystal clear. He knew exactly what the Blue Wolves were playing at. Stefan's eyes overflowed with joy. The reveal of Hank and Sean had gone exactly as he had hoped. "Everyone, you heard it yourselves," he said. "These two evil spirits are affiliated with the World Warriors, and from what I've learned, there are more of them. The World Warriors keep claiming that they want to get rid of the evil spirits, but now we learn that they're harboring them. The ancient Sky Sect clearly knows about it, which is why they want to stop our army from crossing the river. It's obvious what they're planning. Tomorrow, we'll cross the river to root out the evil spirits. I think we can all agree that's what we have to do." With a light twist of his wrist, Stefan made the light in his palm disappear, and Hank and Sean went with it. Quinn's face flushed red. He wanted to save Hank and Sean from Stefan's prison, but before he could stand up, he felt Darwin's hand holding him down. In the section where the Serpentine sect stood, Shiloh started to laugh. "What a joke!" he exclaimed. "So, the World Warriors are the real source of the evil spirits. No wonder they've been blocking us from crossing the river. The ancient sky sect must be the real power behind his plan. I never thought I'd see the day."
Ani stepped forward and blurted out,
"We've been tricked."
His eyes burned with anger, and everyone who looked at him was startled. Just like Darvos, Ani had been an unexpected contender for leadership of the Resistance Army, and it was rumored that Spirit Sky Valley had rewarded him greatly after he returned from the Vicious Land. No one knew what he had become capable of.
"We must cleanse the evil spirits,"
someone cried.
"Yes," another voice answered. "The World Warriors and the Jade Empire can't get away with this."
Hunter stepped forward to speak for the Hellfire sect.
"Not so fast," he said, raising his hand into the air. "We still don't know the truth. We need to investigate this matter."
Among the blazing swords, Nadir spoke up. His expression was as cold and firm as a glacier, and his profile made people feel as if they might cut themselves just by looking at him.
"If the World Warriors serve as the base for the evil spirits, we can't stand idly by," he barked. "But I agree. There's a lot about this whole situation that's suspicious. We need to conduct an investigation." "That sounds reasonable," Jordan answered. "We need an investigation."
Stefan looked troubled. The situation had seemed to go exactly as he had wanted it to, but it was slipping away from him. He had to say something to rile up the crowd again.
"It's very simple," he cried. "We'll find out the truth tomorrow. If the World Warriors and the Jade Empire allow our army to enter their lands and conduct a search, we'll find out what's going on. But if they refuse, we'll have our answer even quicker."
A wave of rage-filled aura surged out of him.
"As the leader of the evil spirits resistance, I hereby give the order that the army will cross the river at dawn tomorrow. We will destroy the evil spirits, and anyone who tries to stop us will be killed without mercy. I expect everyone to remember why we're here in the first place. And don't forget, I'm still in command."
A tense silence fell, and Jordan, Nadir, and Hunter all looked troubled. Even if they had wanted to speak out again, there was nothing more to say. Stefan was in charge, and he had too many supporters to be challenged. The decision had been made. Even those who were sure that Stefan was plotting to weaken the World Warriors and the Jade Empire had to hold their tongue. Protesting would only increase the suspicion that they were protecting the evil spirits, and in a time when the 9 continents were being ravaged, that would be a dangerous thing to have people believe. There was a long moment of silence, but then Darwin suddenly stood up.
"If anyone here decides to attack the World Warriors tomorrow," he said, "they will have declared themselves an enemy of the ancient sky sect. No matter who they are, my sect will respond with force. I give this warning now, and I won't apologize later. Our response will be swift and merciless, but we won't be the ones who make the first move."
He cupped his hand slightly, and the atmosphere in the tent grew calmer. Then an invisible aura surged out of his body, making everyone feel as if they had been struck in the face by a tidal wave. With the entire crowd still reeling from the effect, Darwin turned toward the exit and stormed out. Quinn, Leslie, and the others from the ancient sky sect stood up and followed Darwin out of the tent. Sansa of the Talismans got up from her seat and swept her gaze across the sea of faces.
"We still need to investigate this matter. If anyone attacks the World Warriors tomorrow, we'll come to their aid like we always have."
Darvos stood up and looked at her with a serious expression.
"We need to discuss the matter with our elders. It's a fact that at least 2 evil spirits are working with the World Warriors. Do we, the Talismans, really want to be associated with evil spirits?"
Sansa cast a sidelong glance at him before continuing.
"I'm not asking you to fight alongside evil spirits. However, I believe in the World Warriors. Remember, I'm in charge. If you have any objections, you can return to the sect and let the elders decide."
With that said, she turned on her heels and walked away.
"Sansa, I was only saying that if we align ourselves with evil spirits, what will it do to our reputation?" Darvos asked. "Saying that, I'll follow your lead whatever you decide."
His forced smile did little to hide the coldness in his eyes. The 2 elderly men exchanged worried glances and followed Sansa out of the tent. Ivan's eyes bored into their backs as they left.
"So the Talismans and the ancient sky sect have decided to collude with the World Warriors, thus becoming enemies of the evil spirits' resistance."
The remaining people inside the tent felt a mixture of emotions. They each had their own thoughts on the matter. Many forces allied with the Blue Wolves, Spirit Sky Valley, and the Serpentine sect started to cry out again, eager to prove their loyalty. The World Warriors must be harboring evil spirits. It's no wonder they've risen to power so quickly, one man said. Tomorrow, we can wipe out all the evil spirits, said another. It was a moonless night, with few stars in the sky. Within the mountains, hundreds of auras surged, and flying demon beasts soared into the sky, breaking the silence of night. Many martial arts experts ascended into the air and disappeared over the horizon in the blink of an eye. Their departure caused a commotion, and the atmosphere became tense. What's going on? Why are the disciples of the ancient sky sect and the talismans leaving? One woman asked. I heard that they've broken off relations with the evil spirits resistance. They might even fight with us tomorrow, replied another. I heard that the evil spirits' lair is located inside the home of the World Warriors, said a third. Darwin was standing atop a mountain peak. His robe rippled slightly in the cool breeze of night. The Blue Wolves won't let this matter go. I feel their goal goes beyond dealing with the World Warriors in the Jade Empire. Inform the sect so that they're ready. An expert of the ancient sky sect nodded. Yes, sir. The night sky was as black as ink, the stars hidden behind thick clouds. The surroundings were so dark that one could barely see their hand in front of their face. Sansa and an elderly woman were discussing the situation from the top of a mountain. Sansa, the members of the talismans have done more than enough for the World Warriors, said the elderly woman. If we fight against the evil spirits' resistance tomorrow, we're bound to fail. We have no choice but to retreat. I understand why you like Cahir. His martial arts skills are extraordinary, but he's no good for you. Apparently, he's been involved with several beautiful women in the World Warriors. Do you really want to be one of many? Plus, at this very moment, no one actually knows whether he's alive or dead. He's made many enemies, including the Devil Sect and the Divine Court. Do you really want to involve yourself with someone like that? One day, you'll be the leader of the talismans. You have a responsibility to keep yourself and the disciples of our sect safe. Sansa looked up at the starless sky. I understand your concerns, but I know what I'm doing. I would never intentionally bring the talismans into disrepute. However, in my heart, I believe that Cahir is alive and well, and that one day he'll return to the central region. I know that if we were ever in trouble, he'd come to our aid straight away. Please believe me. The elderly woman shook her head and sighed deeply. You hopeless child. I only hope that he realizes what you've done for him, and that, like you say, he'll return to the central region one day. With his martial arts skills, he should be as strong as Stefan. I hope he'll achieve great things in the future. A young man dressed in a red robe with golden hair descended upon the valley. It was Stefan of the Blue Wolves. A murderous aura pervaded the air. A split second later, a black vortex materialized beside him, and a black-robed man walked out of it. Although he looked real, the outline of his body shimmered slightly. Against the blanket of night, his blood-red eyes were menacing. The aura emanating from his body was powerful enough to freeze the space. The black-robed man looked at Stefan, and his eyes rippled with light. I take it my services aren't required anymore, right? I've already done what I set out to do. That's right, Bloodsoul. Go and find a place to hide, Stefan replied casually. I've lost so much recently, Bloodsoul lamented. When you escaped from the Light Realm, it was me who helped you settle down in the central region. Look, I know you've had a tough time lately, but so have a lot of people, Stefan said. The evil spirits resistance has lost many people, while you have received a lot of benefits. Your martial arts skills have improved exponentially, too. With a wave of his hand, an orb shot out of his palm. The surrounding space fluctuated slightly, and then two people emerged from the space ripple. A bloody aura filled the air. These are the people you want. Their martial arts skills are extraordinary. Now go and find a place to hide and stay there for a while. He quickly handed the two evil spirits to Bloodsoul before disappearing in the blink of an eye. With Stefan gone, Bloodsoul gave a sinister smile. With greedy eyes, he studied the two people in the palm of his hand. After a while, he gave a smile of satisfaction before disappearing too. On the banks of the long river of the central region, in front of the Blue Mountains, the roars of demon beasts echoed. From time to time, a huge demon beast leapt out from the river, causing huge waves to sweep out. The World Warriors and the army of the Jade Empire had set up camp by the riverside. Hardly anyone said a word. The warriors were filled with anxiety and dread for the battle ahead. In the middle of the encampment, many people had gathered inside the largest tent. They all wore serious expressions and remained silent. Everyone's gaze fell on Jared, who was sitting at the front of the tent. His eyes were closed, and in his hand was a messenger stone that flickered with light. Gradually, the stone became dimmer until it finally cracked and shattered. With that, his eyes snapped open, and the light within them fluctuated. His gaze swept across the people in the tent. Sitting in a row beside him were Seamus, Patrizia, Alice, Lara, Aidan, Algernon, Gilbert, Brody, Blair, Caleb, Ezra, and Reuben. Also present were the kings of the Jade Empire, the South Lord, the East Lord, the North Lord, the Lord of Lunaris, Ava, Miles, Brett, and Thorsten. Many powerful young men and women with extraordinary auras were also sitting quietly inside the tent. The young man at the very front exuded an aura that could topple mountains and part seas, and the young woman beside him was as beautiful as a fairy. A faint light bloomed in her large eyes. They were Hugh and Stephanie of the Martial Academy, and behind them were the other surviving students of the Martial Academy, including Sarah, Rosalind, Isabel, Colton, Cole, Matthew, Jacob, and Lyndon. There were also a few unfamiliar faces who seemed to have a special relationship with the lords of the Jade Empire. They were King Raphael, King Santiago, King Nelson, and King Magnus, who had come to the Martial Academy's rescue when it had been under siege. Although they weren't as powerful as the elders and experts of the great sects, they were still well known in their home regions. They all had one thing in common, though. They had all graduated from the Martial Academy. With the Jade Empire in peril once again, friends and allies of the great Bird Emperor had come out in droves to offer their support. Jared swept his gaze over the sea of faces in the tent and took a deep breath. A murderous aura spread out from his body. The message was from the ancient Sky Sect. Stefan and the evil spirits resistance plan to cross the river tomorrow. Lara's expression darkened. If it's a fight they want, it's a fight they'll get. We'll take them down, no problem. Her eyes blazed with lightning. The people in the tent erupted with cries and cheers of support. Their auras surged, illuminating the surrounding space. Seamus, however, didn't share in their enthusiasm and wore a solemn expression. The evil spirits resistance is too powerful. Against their many experts in head-to-head combat, we don't stand a chance. Patrizia, who was sitting next to him, gave a bitter smile. She knew he was right. After all, one superpower had the strength to suppress 10 sects. Thanks to their connection to the Blue Wolves, the evil spirits resistance had the unwavering support of many sects in the central region. The World Warriors and the Jade Empire had only been established for a few years, and so they hadn't forged as many alliances. If they fought against the evil spirits resistance, they would be powerless in the face of all their allies. Alice looked totally dejected, as though she had lost all hope. We have nowhere to retreat to. There's no way that Stefan and his people will let this go. What else can we do but fight? Of course we must fight. However, we must also prepare for the worst-case scenario, Seamus said gravely. If it looks as though we're on the cusp of defeat, we must leave a legacy for the World Warriors and the Jade Empire. The foundations that we've worked so hard to build over the years mustn't be destroyed in one day. Otherwise, what will we say to Kahir when he returns? He turned to Jared, Aurora, Patrizia, and Alice and continued. Tomorrow, if things get truly out of control, you must leave. Don't worry, you won't be running away like cowards. A good warrior knows when to surrender and when to stand their ground. When Kahir returns, he'll repay your wisdom tenfold. As for us old fellows, we've lived a good life. If we die tomorrow, so be it. Seamus, Jared, Aurora, Patrizia, and Alice cried in unison, their eyes filling with tears. Seamus had been with the World Warriors since day one, when they had been but a small force with great ambition. In truth, if it wasn't for his help, expertise, and dedication, the World Warriors wouldn't have reached such great heights. Even in the face of danger, he was still thinking about the World Warriors, willing to sacrifice his life to continue their legacy. Everyone was moved by his selfless attitude. The tent fell silent. If war broke out the next day, they knew it would be a bloody one. Come on, everyone. We mustn't lose all hope. Don't forget we still have two powerful allies in the ancient Sky Sect and the Talismans. We aren't fighting this battle alone, Jared said, forcing a smile. Though it was a dark night in Dandelion City, the lanterns lining the streets provided sufficient light. With the young martial artists traveling to the battlefield, the population of Dandelion City had been reduced by more than half. Only women and children and the elderly and weak remained in the city. The army of the Jade Empire hadn't ordered the residents of Dandelion City to fight against the evil spirits resistance. Rather, the young men and women had bravely volunteered their services. If the elders of the Rotw family hadn't put their foot down, the elderly and the weak would have also rushed to the battlefield. In many places in Dandelion City, women, children, and the elderly had gathered to pray for the safe return of their sons and daughters. They burned incense and kowtowed. As they couldn't fight on the battlefield themselves, it gave them some comfort asking the heavens for their protection.
I pray to the heavens that the brave soldiers of the Jade Empire will defeat the evil spirits resistance and return victorious, protecting the Jade Empire for thousands of years to come, said one elderly man. Since the Rotw family had risen to power, they had treated the citizens of the Jade Empire very well. They didn't collect heavy taxes from commoners, and only collected a small amount of taxes from merchants. They also frequently provided relief to the poor. Under their rule, the Jade Empire was prosperous and peaceful. The citizens' quality of life had much improved. It was even rare to see the strong bullying the weak. The citizens of the Jade Empire knew that it was all thanks to the Rotw family's efforts that they were able to live such peaceful lives. If the evil spirits' resistance crossed into their territory, the citizens knew they would raze the place to the ground. To defend the peace of their empire, the young men and women of Dandelion City were willing to risk their lives. Under the night sky, two women, one young and the other elderly, quietly appeared above Dandelion City. The young woman was wearing a green dress that fluttered in the night breeze. Her dark hair, silky smooth, fell all the way down her back. Her delicate features gave her an otherworldly beauty. The elderly woman was wearing a plain dress. Although she looked frail, she floated through the air with ease. The deep wrinkles on her face suggested she had lived a difficult life. Talia, this is Dandelion City, the elderly woman said, looking at the vast city below.
Her eyes twinkled as brightly as the stars in the sky. Talia's eyes darted from side to side as she took in the sights of the city.
Aster, I can feel it. This is the place where my brother grew up.
She was curious about the place that had helped shape her brother. Aster gave her a kind smile.
For such a small place to be able to produce such a talented martial artist is rather extraordinary.
For a moment, Talia looked slightly offended.
He's my brother. It's not that strange.
Then she smiled at Aster once more. She had a smile that could bring men to their knees and topple empires. Looking down at the city again, her eyebrows furrowed with concern.
Many people are praying to the heavens. Do you think something's happened?
As Aster looked ahead, her eyes widened with surprise.
Hey, what's that over there?
In the vast and magnificent royal palace, a multicolored light shot into the sky, as bright as a moon. Talia followed Aster's gaze. Her eyes lit up when she saw the resplendent light coming from the palace.
I think it's related to you. It's the aura of immortal grass.
How strange. I didn't expect to see immortal grass growing here.
Curious, Aster rushed forward to take a closer look. In the blink of an eye, she arrived in front of the royal palace. Talia smiled. At that moment, she was feeling a mixture of emotions, nervous, excited, and hopeful.
Father, brother, it's Talia. Are you waiting for me in your home? I've missed you so much.
With that said, she disappeared into thin air and appeared again beside Aster. Aster gazed lovingly at her.
According to the information we've received from the sect, your brother is no longer in Dandelion City, and your father hasn't been seen in months either.
Talia remained silent. She gazed at the small mountain range in front of the royal palace, which also flickered with multicolored light. The air was dense with energy, and the surroundings rippled with the dragon energy of the palace. Suddenly, the sound of rushing wind could be heard as she tore through the space. She seemed to have sensed something. Without obstruction, she entered the royal palace. Ralph had set up a talisman array around the place. Its defenses were so strong that an ordinary martial artist at the martial domination stage wouldn't have the ability to break in. However, Talia had entered with complete ease. "I'm guessing this talisman array was set up by that old fellow. It's rather impressive," Aster muttered as she entered the palace without causing any ripples. Within the royal palace of the Jade Empire, Talia slowly floated across the sky. Her expression became solemn as her thoughts turned to Cahir, who had been mocked and ridiculed as a small boy. Behind the Rotw Manor, Cahill Mountain was surging with multicolored light and brimming with energy. Inside the restrictive seal, two great treasures, ghost grass and immortal grass, were growing in abundance. They brought great benefits to the citizens of Dandelion City. "We're here," Talia said softly. In her mind's eye, she saw a young man sitting alone on Cahill Mountain, the focus of people's mockery and scorn. Occasionally, he would smile, ignoring the bullies around him. Suddenly, she felt her chest tighten. "Why is it so painful?" she asked, clutching her chest. It felt as though a knife had been twisted in her heart. She turned her attention to the place where the multicolored light and energy were plentiful. Although the restrictive seal that Ralph had set up was very powerful, she entered the space with ease. Inside the restrictive seal, two types of spirit grass covered the mountain. Their shoots were lush and full of vitality. Beams of multicolored light illuminated the sky, and waves of dense energy swept across the space. Talia walked toward the center of the mountain. When she reached the roots of the immortal grass and the ghost grass, she bent down and scooped up a handful of soil. Her lips started to tremble. Then tears rolled down her cheeks as she thought of all the sacrifices Cahir had made. "Brother, you've endured so much so that I could live." Within the soil, she could feel the aura of her brother, whom she had never met before. Aster quietly appeared next to her. Looking at Talia, her eyes filled with sorrow. "Don't be sad. Your brother's still alive." Talia broke into a smile. "I'm not sad, I'm happy." She put a handful of soil into her cosmic pouch and stood up. "I can feel him everywhere. He was buried here, but by some divine miracle, he came back from the dead and obtained great benefits." Aster looked at the lush ghost grass and immortal grass around her and was also surprised. "It is indeed a miracle." The Rotw Manor had retained its original appearance, even though the royal palace had been built around it. Talia flitted behind the Rotw Manor. There was a smile in her eyes as she thought of her brother playing on Cahill Mountain as a child. Occasionally, he had ventured into the wilderness with a white-haired elderly man, where they had caught fish and barbecued meat. She slowly walked forward and appeared in front of the courtyard of the Rotw Manor. When her gaze fell on the door to the courtyard, she froze. It looked strangely familiar. The door creaked as she pushed it open. The simple and quiet courtyard was extremely spacious. A feeling of déjà vu came over her. It was as though she had been there before. In the courtyard was a single chair. Her eyes filled with tears again and her body trembled. She pictured a middle-aged man and a young man sitting facing one another. Alone in the darkness of night, they were drinking wine while staring at the moon. The scene was etched on her mind as though she had actually been there. Tears continued to stream down her face. She couldn't stop them from coming. Looking at the empty chair, she was weighed down with sadness and grief. She had never felt a heartache like it. Aster was standing behind Talia, yet she didn't approach her to comfort her. She sighed deeply. "Father, brother, I've come back for you," Talia said. No longer able to hold back her emotions, she sobbed convulsively. Her wails broke the silence of night, her voice echoing across the courtyard. No one responded to her words, though. Because of the current situation involving the evil spirit's resistance, everyone in the city was on high alert. Alarmed by the sound of her cries, several members of the Rotw family appeared outside the courtyard in the blink of an eye. The younger generation of the Rotw family had traveled to the long river of the central region, while the elders had remained to watch over the city. Zane, the patriarch of the Rotw family, rushed into the courtyard. Numerous people followed Zane and quickly surrounded Aster and Talia. "How dare you trespass into the Rotw Manor?" an elderly man shouted angrily. Aster remained rooted to the ground. Talia, who had stopped crying by that point, slowly turned around. Under the starlight, her face was revealed for all to see.
Kahir, is that you?
One elderly woman asked. When the elders of the Rotw family saw the ethereal-looking woman, they couldn't help but gasp with shock. On closer inspection, however, one could see that it wasn't Kahir, whom everyone had been praying for, but a young woman who bore an uncanny resemblance to him. The elders were stunned by how similar they both looked, and immediately thought they must be related in some way. Zane turned pale with shock. "You must be—" His lips trembled as he spoke. In truth, he didn't know his brother Kelvin well. However, over the years he had learned a few things about him, mostly when Kahir had poured his heart out. Even though Kahir had never gone into much detail, Zane had been able to piece together some of Kelvin's life and knew he had a daughter. Talia steadied herself and looked at him. Then she gracefully bowed and said respectfully, "Greetings, uncle." Zane trembled as though he had been struck by lightning. "You're Kelvin's daughter, Talia." He burst into tears of joy as he stepped forward to help her up. "Child, get up. There's no need for such formalities. I'm so pleased you're finally home." The courtyard erupted in jubilation.
Kelvin's daughter has returned,
one elderly man cried. The elderly women of the Rotw family were surprised to learn that Kelvin had a daughter. It was the first they had heard of it. They started to discuss the situation in hushed voices.
"I had no idea Kelvin even had a daughter. How come we didn't know? She must be Kahir's twin. One can hardly tell them apart. It's obvious that she's also extraordinary."
Some of Kahir's aunts joked and laughed.
"She looks exactly like him. God help us if she has his talents, too."
An hour later, Zane, Talia, Aster, and several highly respected elders of the Rotw family gathered in the main hall of the Rotw Manor. Talia listened attentively as Zane explained the current situation with her brother and father. Occasionally she frowned, and at other times her eyebrows furrowed with concern. "At the moment, we don't know your father's whereabouts. Alice of the Bolton family and your brother said he recently obtained great benefits in the heavenly wasteland. Perhaps he still has things to do before he returns. However, it's already been several years since anyone has seen him. After the Devil Sect and the Divine Court joined forces to destroy Seven Stars Hall, our family hasn't seen or heard from Kahir. Rumor has it that he appeared in the Kinglands, and then later on in the Beast Realm. The Devil Sect and the Divine Court have been after him for some time, so naturally we're all very concerned." The appearance of Kelvin's daughter should have been a joyous occasion for Zane. However, given the current situation that the Rotw family and the Jade Empire were in, he couldn't truly be happy. Talia's expression darkened upon hearing about Kahir's enemies. "The Devil Sect and the Divine Court will get what's coming to them." An invisible aura fluctuated from her body, containing a tremendous pressure.
"Your aura's very powerful,"
one elder gasped.
The elders were wide-eyed with shock. Under that kind of pressure, their bodies trembled uncontrollably, and some were almost brought to their knees. They were unable to resist her immense aura. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to affect you all," Talia said, retracting her aura. The elders of the Rotw family shook their heads and smiled, not wanting her to feel bad. They weren't offended by her actions. However, they couldn't hide their surprise and confusion. "You're very powerful. In fact, your aura isn't inferior to Kahir's," Zane said. Talia smiled. Although she had never set foot inside the Rotw Manor, for some reason she felt as though she knew the place. Looking around the hall, she asked, "Uncle, was the Jade Empire built by my brother?" "That's right, and he formed the World Warriors. He founded both when he was very young. Over the years, they've gotten stronger and stronger." As Zane spoke, his eyes filled with pride. "Your brother said he wanted to build his own nation." "Build his own nation," Talia repeated. Aster, who was sitting beside Talia, was rather taken aback by what she had heard. "Where's Aurora and Jared? Why aren't they here?" Talia asked. "Also, on my way into the city, I saw many people praying to the heavens. Has something happened recently?" She recognized several people in the hall from the picture scroll. However, some faces were missing. In truth, she found the atmosphere in the Rotw family and the Jade Empire to be heavy and depressing, which was why she had asked. "It's all because of the evil spirit's resistance," Zane said. He quickly explained the current situation in the central region. "According to the news from Jared, the evil spirit's resistance will go to war with the Jade Empire tomorrow. If that happens, it will be a disaster for the central region. It's all the more difficult because no one knows where Kahir is. Talia stood up from her seat. Tomorrow morning, the members of the evil spirit's resistance will get their comeuppance. My brother might not be here, but I am. Talia, you mustn't involve yourself in matters of the outside world, Aster urged. But this isn't a matter of the outside world. It concerns my brother, and he's my business. Kahir wants to build his own nation, and I want to be a part of that, Talia said with a resolute face. Seeing how determined she was, Aster didn't say anything more on the matter. Within the home of the golden-winged birds, the domineering aura and golden lightning had long since dissipated, and the sealed space inside the secret grounds had become much calmer. Kahir's eternal spirit power within his inner temple was still increasing at a crazy rate. Waves of aura, as well as golden electric arcs, continued to ripple from his forehead, rising into the sky. A vast and boundless eternal spirit power swept out from his body, accompanied by the silver soul thunder, the earth-shattering thunder, the burning thunder, and the power of his spirit root. That kind of eternal spirit power was simply abnormal. In fact, it was strong enough to crush the eternal spirit of a spirit talisman master of the same level. In the martial path, strengthening one's eternal spirit power was the most difficult, yet Kahir's aura rose unobstructed. No one knew how long it would take to complete the process. The first ray of light broke through the curtain of night, giving birth to a beautiful dawn. Early in the morning, the roars of demon beasts could be heard within the Blue Mountains and the long river of the central region. Countless auras surged, emitting a killing intent that could freeze the heavens and the earth. Huge ships floated on the river, manned by brave warriors, and hundreds of experts hovered in the sky, blotting out the sun. As the morning light pierced through the thin mist, one could see over 1,000 people standing in front of the Jade Empire army. Their auras were the most terrifying. They were the experts of the ancient Sky Sect, the Talismans, and the World Warriors. Darwin, Quinn, Kareem, Glenn, Marisol, Leslie, Malachi, Lex, Leland, Sansa, Darvos, and Riley were at the front on the right-hand side. Jared, Aurora, Seamus, Patrizia, Alice, the Silver-Winged Condor, the North Lord, and the students of the Martial Academy were at the front on the left-hand side. Jared bowed to the experts of the ancient Sky Sect and the Talismans to signify his gratitude. Disciples of the ancient Sky Sect and the Talismans, on behalf of the Jade Empire, the World Warriors, and the Rosark family, I want to thank you all. We'll never forget the kindness you've shown us. Everyone looked at him and nodded. Jared had broken through to the Marvel level of the Martial Sovereign stage in a short space of time. Now, many elders of the great powers were inferior to him. Even among the younger generation of the Central Region's 9 great forces, he probably ranked in the top 5. He had ruled the World Warriors and the Jade Empire well over the years, making them a force to be reckoned with. With such talent and intelligence, even the experts of the ancient Sky Sect and the Talismans afforded him the utmost respect. Quinn waved his hand dismissively. There's no need to thank us. The World Warriors and the ancient Sky Sect are allies. Kahir's also my disciple. It's only right that we stand together in the face of danger. Kahir saved my life. As long as I'm here, the Talismans will always come to the aid of the World Warriors and the Jade Empire, Sansa said with a smile. Suddenly, a golden light flashed from Darwin's eyes. They're here, he said simply. Hearing that, everyone's eyes lit up as they looked forward. Their expressions changed slightly. The mist in front of them started to ripple, and the river raged. In the distance, hundreds of demon beasts tore through the sky, giving the appearance of an angry thundercloud advancing at incredible speed. The air vibrated vigorously as the mist was torn apart. As they roared and flapped their powerful wings, waves tens of feet high were whipped up. The members of the evil spirit's resistance, in tightly packed formations, followed closely behind them. Their auras induced a powerful and vigorous energy, causing forked lightning to flash across the sky. Suddenly, thousands of people lined up along the bank of the long river like a swarm of locusts, coming into the World Warriors and their allies' line of vision. The 10 days are up. If the people of the Jade Empire and the World Warriors try to block the evil spirit's resistance, we'll kill you all without mercy, a voice roared. The sound was deafening, causing violent waves to surge into the sky. Jared flew upward to take a closer look at the advancing army. Seeing their vast auras, he turned to the people behind him. The enemy is here. Citizens of the Jade Empire, disciples of the World Warriors, soldiers of Beast Hall, you must retreat now. Alice soared into the sky with a fierce look of determination. Her mighty aura swept in all directions, causing her dress to billow behind her. The people of the Jade Empire are willing to die in battle. Only cowards retreat. Blair took to the sky and settled beside her. The disciples of the World Warriors never back down. There are no cowards among us. The soldiers of the Beast Hall never give in, the silver-winged condor said as he soared across the sky. His demonic aura overflowed into the heavens. It was incomparably domineering. Then let's fight them to the death, Jared said. The earth-shaking roars of demon beasts from the allied forces resounded like thunder, and the long river surged violently like a tsunami. Rumor has it that the World Warriors and the demon beasts of Heaven Beast Hall are incomparably ferocious. They're certainly living up to their reputation, said a young woman of the talismans. Her peers nodded in agreement, in awe of their strength. Although the World Warriors were fewer in number compared to the other great forces, their ferocious nature and iron will certainly made up for any misgivings. Seeing the World Warriors standing firm and resolute in the face of the evil spirit's resistance, the talismans were amazed. Jared's eyes were filled with pride at their show of strength. He turned around and cast his gaze over the members of the evil spirit's resistance who were swiftly moving into position. Bolts of lightning shot out of his eyes. "If you cross the river, you'll all die," he yelled. From the evil spirit's resistance in front, a cold voice rang out. "The World Warriors are harboring evil spirits. We must root out this evil and destroy their lair. Kill them all." In an instant, both armies erupted with battle cries. The noise was deafening. The warriors in the sky rushed forward, chanting, "Kill!" Jared roared, "Kill those who wish to destroy the Jade Empire!" With a wave of his hand, lightning flashed from his body. Fierce winds blew and thunderclouds rolled across the sky, gathering directly above him. "Let's move the warships first," Patrizia said. "The Demon Beast army will attack from the front, while the experts of the Jade Empire and the World Warriors will attack from the sides." Her killing intent swept out. With that said, the warships whirred to life, moving forward at great speed, and pillars of energy soared into the sky. The blue mountains started to tremble, and the water of the long river whirled. The demon beasts in the water and the soldiers of Heaven Beast Hall leaped into action as the World Warriors and the experts of the Jade Empire appeared in the sky. Dylan rushed through the air, rallying his troops. His aura was wild and domineering. "Disciples of the ancient sky sect, prepare for battle." As Sansa hovered before the talismans, her long dress lifted slightly in the wind, and her hair blew across her face. "Disciples of the talismans, help the Jade Empire kill their enemies." A few seconds later, countless runes soared into the sky above the central region, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. Even from afar, one could feel their terrifying energies tear across the sky. There were no last-minute negotiations. The two forces had been in a stalemate for several months, so a great battle was unavoidable. Some people had been secretly steering the situation in that way. As the two armies collided with one another, the long river of the central region burst its banks, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. Instantly, miserable screams rang out, and blood rained down from the sky, turning the river red. Many extraordinary young men and women, including Shiloh of the Serpentine sect and Ani of Spirit Sky Valley, emerged from the evil spirit's resistance. "You think you're way better than you are," Shiloh yelled. "Prepare to meet your doom." At that moment, Stefan and the elders of the various major powers were standing behind the army, observing the situation. Shiloh, Ani, and the other expert martial artists of the younger generation flew through the air, emitting a murderous aura. As they unleashed their terrifying power, tens of demon beasts from Heaven Beast Hall and soldiers of the Jade Empire exploded. "Kill!" Alice fumed as she charged forward without hesitation. Her target was Shiloh of the Serpentine sect. The sky darkened as a lion's roar echoed across the sky like thunder. The wise demon lion of Dandelion City released multiple bolts of lightning, striking the enemy with incredible force. Tens of men fell from the sky, screaming in agony. Elsewhere in the sky, the silver-winged condor's body started to expand. After reaching his maximum size, he flapped his wings, wanting to rip the space apart. "Ani, I'll tear you apart limb by limb," Dylan shouted, his aura fluctuating. A golden lion appeared behind him. The two horns on its forehead resembled dragon horns, giving it a noble appearance. It was as though a divine beast had risen from the dead to take revenge against its enemies. As quick as lightning, it soared into the sky, locking onto Ani from Spirit Sky Valley. "Kill!" the students of the Martial Academy shouted as they rushed forward to block the geniuses of the Blue Wolves and the Serpentine sect. "Charge!" Leland, Lex, Malachi, and Riley yelled in unison, sprinting forward to meet the enemy. The North Lord, Algernon, Gilbert, and Aiden didn't hold back either. As the experts exchanged blows, deafening sounds rang out unceasingly across the long river. Powerful energies swept across the land, engulfing the sky and the earth. A tall, sturdy man with well-defined features burst forth like a huge dragon snaking across the sky. His aura was powerful enough to destroy mountains and part seas. It was Hugh of the Martial Academy. He flew across the river, killing everyone in his path. "Do you really think you have the strength to destroy the Jade Empire? We'll fight until the last man standing," Colton shouted, his eyes blazing with a fiery red light. As his evil energy erupted, starting a massacre, his long hair blew wildly in the wind. His aura was just as powerful as Hugh's. "Quick, gather around me," Stephanie said urgently. Under the protection of Sarah, Rosalind, and Isabel, she quickly set up a powerful talisman array that enveloped a large number of enemy soldiers. Trapped, with no hope of escape, they exploded one after another. "Members of the Rotw family, prepare for battle," Aurora yelled. Lightning shot out from her eyes, and purple electric arcs emanated from the center of her body, flashing in the air. The younger generation of the Rotw family, including Eunice, Veng, Ruhan, Mike, and Vesemir, quickly gathered behind her. Many of them had reached the martial sovereign stage. Over the past few years, the Rotw family had been steadily increasing in strength. Eunice and Veng had become famous in the ancient Sky sect for their extraordinary martial arts skills and were two of the strongest warriors of their generation. It was rumored that Veng had battled against Dylan, emerging triumphant in the end. The members of the Rotw family activated their Thunderbolt bloodline, and their auras surged. Instantly, thunderclouds formed in the sky, crackling with purple lightning. A formidable pressure descended upon the space, causing everyone in the vicinity to cower. "Enemies of the Jade Empire, prepare to die," Eunice spat. He, Veng, Vesemir, Ruhan, and the other members of the Rotw family rushed forward, bringing about a chaotic purple thunderstorm. Their murderous auras tore through the sky without obstruction, killing hundreds of enemy soldiers at once. The members of the evil spirit's resistance started to retreat in fear. Jordan appeared in front of Jared, Patrizia, and Seamus, who were commanding their forces from the front. "Jared, let's put an end to this war. As long as the World Warriors promise not to have anything to do with evil spirits, we'll try our best to spare the innocent. We only want to kill the evil spirits." Jordan's eyes were filled with divine light like the stars in the sky. The 9 scars on his head flickered with runes, giving him the appearance of a god. A young man with thin lips and delicate skin appeared next to Jordan. His long black hair, as smooth as silk, was tied up with a single red ribbon. It was Hunter, the #1 person among the younger generation of the Hellfire sect. He cast a warm gaze upon Jared. "Let's put an end to the fighting for Kahir's sake. As long as the World Warriors don't defend the evil spirits, we'll ask the evil spirits' resistance to spare the citizens of the Jade Empire." A few seconds later, Nadir landed beside Jordan and Hunter. The 3 swords on his back emitted beams of light. "The disciples of the Blazing Swords don't want to go to war with the Jade Empire and the World Warriors," he said to Jared. "As long as you can prove that you aren't harboring evil spirits, we won't harm a single soldier of the Jade Empire." With a look of terror on her face, Jamie appeared before Aurora, Sansa, and Leslie. You won't be able to stop the evil spirit's resistance. Put an end to this war. Otherwise, thousands of people will die, and blood will flow like a river. Her body was enveloped with a delicate flame that flickered in the breeze. If your army retreats, there will be no need for blood to flow like a river. The Jade Empire army will never surrender. We fight to the death, Aurora said. Jamie shrugged her shoulders. Then we must fight. The evil spirits must be purged from our lands. It's our responsibility and obligation. She gave a weak smile. I don't want to fight with you. I hope you'll reconsider. Leslie scowled at her. I've thought about it. Now let's fight. Runes gushed out of her body in all directions. Sansa didn't even bother wasting her breath on Jamie. Quickly, she formed a hand seal and prepared a talisman array. Stefan swept through the air toward Jordan, his entire body glistening with divine light. With haughty eyes, he said, "Leave Jared to me. You deal with the rest." "Stefan, come on then if you think you're strong enough," Jared shouted. He spread his arms and activated the Thunderbolt bloodline. Lightning flashed all over his body as his punishing aura swept toward Stefan. Jordan, Hunter, Nadir, and Jamie were a little taken aback by the ferocity of Jared's aura. However, they didn't have time to weigh up a member of the opposition and quickly turned their attention to Sansa, Leslie, and Aurora. "Sansa, I'll help you," Darvos yelled. He rushed through the air with a smile on his face and knocked Hunter out of the way. The battle between the elites of the region erupted violently. After just a short time of fighting, there were incredible losses on both sides. Pools of blood littered the ground, and torn-off limbs and corpses floated on top of the river. Miserable wails resounded throughout the sky unceasingly. In the sky above the battlefield, the elders of the Blue Wolves, the Serpentine Sect, Spirit Sky Valley, the Immortals, the Blazing Swords, the Celestial Titans, and the other great forces revealed themselves. They were all very powerful, with some of them almost at the martial domination stage. "Darwin, Alfonso, do you want to interfere in this war and risk the chance of destroying the ancient Sky Sect and the talismans?" one elder asked. Whenever the evil spirit's resistance went into battle, there was an understanding among the people of the great forces that they weren't to touch the experts at the martial domination stage. Even then, the principle remained the same. The various great powers had no intention of calling the experts at the martial domination stage into battle. If they were to make a move, the consequences would be unimaginable. The entire central region would likely be destroyed. Alfonso swept his gaze across the elders of the Blue Wolves. His eyes sparkled like stars, and his body rippled with a soul-stirring aura. He was one of the talisman's most powerful spirit talisman masters. Kahir had met him before. He turned to Darwin. "I guess we should make a move. We have no other choice." Darwin gave a wry smile and cracked his knuckles. "It's been a while since I exercised my muscles." His eyes lit up as he looked toward the heavens. "Then there's nothing more to be said. Let's do it," Alfonso said with a firm nod. In the blink of an eye, the top-notch experts of the various sects pierced through the clouds in the sky. Dazzling rune light surged out in all directions, exploding like thunder. It seemed as though they wanted the heavens and earth to collapse. However, in terms of numbers, there were far more top-notch experts in the Blue Wolves, Spirit Sky Valley, the Serpentine Sect, and the other great forces than there were in the Talismans and the Ancient Sky Sect. Claps of thunder reverberated incessantly as the war raged on, and huge waves crashed against the shore. The stench of blood filled the air, making some of the soldiers nauseous. Severed limbs and corpses were strewn across the ground. It was a shocking sight to behold. The Rotw family, the World Warriors, the Martial Academy, the Ancient Sky Sect, and the Talismans had sent many strong martial artists into battle. In particular, the strength that the members of the Rotw family and the students of the Martial Academy displayed shocked everyone. It was obvious they were just as strong as the younger generation of the 9 great forces. In fact, their combined strength was far superior. Nevertheless, against so many powerful forces, the odds were firmly stacked against them. In midair, Seamus formed a hand seal. "Go," he muttered under his breath. With that, an invisible wave of eternal spirit power rushed out from his forehead like a tide. In an instant, thousands of puppets poured out from the ships below. They had hollow eyes and cold, murderous auras. They arranged themselves into neat lines before charging toward the members of the evil spirit's resistance. Under Seamus's guidance, The World Warriors had secretly refined thousands of puppets in case one day they faced an existential threat. "It's an army of puppets. Run for your lives!" screamed one member of the evil spirit's resistance. "Help me, I'm surrounded!" cried another. The puppet army was a well-oiled killing machine. Dealing with them would be a nightmare for any strong force. The members of the evil spirit's resistance were forced back. Some people were shocked, while others cried with fear. "We also have puppets. Quickly activate your puppets. Ours are just as good as theirs," said a young woman. The members of the evil spirit's resistance shouted and jeered as they summoned their puppets. They were almost identical to the World Warriors' puppets, as they had been refined inside the World Pavilion. Over the past few months, the evil spirit's resistance had exchanged healing medicines, weapon-refining materials, and other highly sought-after items for puppets at the World Pavilion. They had imprinted their soul marks on the puppets, thus gaining control of them. Some of the wealthier experts even had 2 or 3 puppets, which made them feel rather smug. "Kill!" shouted the people in control of the puppets. Immediately, their puppets advanced toward the World Warriors' puppet army. Suddenly, the person in charge of the World Pavilion, George, quietly appeared in the air above the evil spirit's resistance. Although he had a naturally calm temperament, at that moment, he was furious. "Don't blame me for what's about to happen. By attacking the World Warriors, you've brought this on yourselves," he said with a sinister smile. As George's hand seal condensed, an invisible ripple emerged from between his eyebrows. Then, just as the fighters from the evil spirit's resistance activated the thousands of puppets they had purchased from the World Pavilion, those puppets suddenly froze. All at once, they let out ear-splitting screeches and pounced toward their masters at lightning speed. The puppets were extremely powerful killing machines. The smiles of their owners had barely faded when many of them were torn apart by the puppets. "This isn't good. The puppets are out of control," someone shouted. Some of the stronger disciples in the evil spirit's resistance came back to their senses in time to defend themselves. But, in their panic, many of the weaker warriors were killed by the remaining puppets. The survivors screamed out in pain. They had been badly injured. Once those experts had gotten over the shock, they began to curse their opponents. "It's definitely the work of the Ancient Sky Sect. They must have managed to control our puppets somehow. The Ancient Sky Sect is too ruthless. We'll never let them forget this." At that moment, the puppet army from the World Warriors, the Ancient Sky Sect, and the Talismans were inflicting serious damage on their opponents. However, the evil spirit's resistance had some strong experts among their younger ranks. Under the leadership of those talented youths, they managed to suppress the demon beasts and the puppets. Although the World Warriors, the Ancient Sky Sect, and the Talismans were fierce, they were up against some extraordinary disciples. With the gap in strength, it wasn't long before they felt themselves being suppressed by the enemy. All around the long river, the air was full of endless screaming. Demon beasts roared and blood fog poured down, dyeing the water red. As time went on, the water became dotted with dead bodies. The World Warriors, the Ancient Sky Sect, and the Talismans had been forced to retreat. They had lost countless demon beasts and puppets in the ongoing bloodbath. Then, under the command of the Blue Wolves, the Serpentine Sect, and Spirit Sky Valley, the huge army of the evil spirit's resistance formed a siege around the enemy forces. Blair, Brody, Algernon, Gilbert, Avery, and Ezra stepped forward, prepared to fight to the death.